We'll see the disabled section as the vulnerable or marginalized section of Indian society. Now again, it's the same structure with whatever kind of vulnerable sections you are looking at. Basically, you need to look at their status, the status in terms of demography, the status in terms of socio-economy. Then you basically need to emphasize upon the issues. The issues also social, political, economic, technological, legal, ethical of this perspective. Then you need to look into measures. Measures are mostly constitutional, legal and institutional. It's a fixed format. Disabled. The demography is how much? 2.2%. Sorry. 2.2% with respect to the demography of population, and 28% of this disabled people have never attended school in their life or never attended an educational institutions, and the literacy rate is 45%. So when you look at the demographic status, one is 2.2% of total population is here disabled. Then you have 28% with respect to never attended school, and 45% is their literacy rate. Now basically when you look at the issues of disabled, now we have seen with respect to different marginal sections, it is mostly social, economic, political, all this. But this disabled section of society as a marginal section of the society will have an additional burden of physical issues. They'll have an issue with respect to their mobility. They'll have an issue with respect to their physiological functioning. Now when they have an issue with respect to their physiological functioning or with respect to their physical mobility, that becomes the root cause for other issues to erupt. Now why do you think 28% of the people or 28% of your disabled section never attended schools? Because of their inability to physically move or certain physiological shortcomings. It might be with respect to your neuro or ophtha, any kind of physiological shortcomings. So when you look at this issues of disabled, it is mostly physical and the corresponding social impacts. Now physical, the issue is with respect to the mobility, with respect to certain physiological shortcomings or inefficient physiological functioning. Inefficient physiological functioning or physical mobility. Now when you talk about the other issues of disability or disabled person, the other one is your social issues. Now when it comes to social issues, it is discrimination, social discrimination, then lack of health, education facilities, or lack of conducive social environment. For example, you talk about ramps in your schools, ramps in your hospitals or buses. It is basically in order to enable your disabled people or disabled section of the society to avail the basic social needs. Barrier-free environment. Or your government has started something called as Accessible India. Now the Accessible India, it basically was to ensure the barrier-free movement or barrier-free engagement or barrier-free integration of this particular section into mainstream society. So discrimination, health and education, And the third type of social issue is something called as social disowning. Social disowning. You basically disown him. In the sense, it might be with respect to the peer-to-peer relations, or it might be with respect to your sibling relations, or it might be with respect to the parental relations. There is a kind of social disowning, or basically an effect of orphaning. You orphan the person who is disabled. You orphan him not only with respect to the social relations, but also with respect to the emotional bondage that you are supposed to maintain with that kind of person. Then next, the resultant of these social issues is your economic issues. Yes? What are the different economic issues? One is unemployment. Unemployment. This main issue behind unemployment is lack of infrastructural compatibility. Lack of infrastructural compatibility. For example, in your schools, how many of the schools provide a provision of Braille script? They don't. Forget about Braille script. What about ramps for those people who are orthopedically disabled?
Lack of special schools also for special people.
Yes, yes. So unemployment, then income insecurities. Income insecurities, or economic stereotyping. I'll tell you one classic example with respect to economic stereotyping. Now, when you look at the notifications that are provided for your college professors or the faculty in colleges, you would see that only certain section of physically disabled people are allowed. For example, if we talk about hearing impaired people, they are not allowed to appear for the interviews of the faculty positions in university. But the irony is they are allowed to appear for PhD examination, they are allowed to do their PhDs, but they are not allowed to appear as a faculty. This is what is meant by economic stereotyping. Here certain sections or certain types of disabilities are stereotyped that you cannot or you are not fit for this particular job. Whereas visually impaired person can apply for faculty position, but your hearing impaired person cannot apply for faculty position. I don't understand the rationale behind this. Now there was one friend of mine who was hearing impaired. He has done his PhD. But he is not able to get into faculty positions of this inherent drawback in the policy making. And you believe it or not, we wrote more than 50 applications to Department of or Ministry of HRD and Department of Public Grievance. It is unfair because you are allowing him to do PhD, and when a person is doing PhD, after PhD, what is the immediate consequence of PhD? A faculty position. You become an associate professor or assistant professor or some teacher. But in the recruitment side, you are not allowing him to become a teacher because you have disowned or you have disabled the hearing impaired people to sit for interview of faculty positions. Don't you think it is a kind of inherent loophole in the law or inherent legal inconsistency? That is what is meant by economic stereotyping. Or employment stereotyping. Then the consequences of all this is here.
Isn't he allowed not only for all schools? Is he allowed for at least in faculty in some schools or
No.
not even impaired schools?
No. That's an inherent legal inconsistency. That is the reason why we have written more than 50 applications. Still there is no change, no reply, nothing. The policy makers are by themselves deaf.
Really.
Now when you are not allowing him to join a faculty position, please don't allow him to do PhD also.
What is the use of this?
You slog your days for 5 years and now you are not allowed to sit for faculty position. What nonsense. And for that condition you don't allow him to do MTech also. Yes, you don't allow him to do masters also. Restricted till bachelor's. If he finds his placement, well and good, otherwise he will search for some occupation which he is allowed to do for. Because after masters also most of the people go for teaching only. Or they'll have certain research inclinations. Unless and until you have research inclinations, you will not do masters. Now in research you are allowing hearing impaired, but for faculty you are not allowing, means it is unfair. Unfair. You are in fact wasting whole of the lifetime of that individual now. So ethical, or it is mostly an emotional issue. The emotional turmoil, the emotional distress, the emotional isolation, the emotional disconnection. Emotional distress or emotional isolation or emotional disconnect. These are certain issues with respect to your disabled section. Now what about measures? Measures, again your constitutional measures. Your constitutional measures, Article 46, Article 41, Article 46, Article 39A, Article 39A, and Article 17, untouchability. Because leprosy is also considered as one form of disability. Then legal rights or legal measures. Protection of Disabled Rights Act 2016. Protection of Disabled Rights Act 2016. Then certain administrative measures. Certain administrative measures like your National Social Assistance Program, NSAP. National Social Assistance Program, where it provides pensions for disabled persons. Then Accessible India or Sugamya Abhiyan, Accessible India or Sugamya Abhiyan. Then district rehabilitation centers. District rehabilitation centers. District rehabilitation centers.
There is some ministry which deals with this, right?
Social empowerment. Ministry of Social Empowerment has a department of disabled persons. There is no separate ministry. Ministry of Social Empowerment. Now what is the way forward? What is the way forward?
There are any opportunities making them aware of their rights.
Okay, awareness, sensitization. Awareness, sensitization.
Create a special school for these disabled.
Okay, you basically
high level education.
You basically look for certain conducive environment for their or mainstreaming of disabled sections.
Enforcement of existing.
mainstreaming. Then you can even talk about something called as social modeling. Social modeling. For example, you appoint Miss Ira Singhal, the All India Rank 1, 2015, as the ambassador. Now here what is happening, in spite of her disability, she has cracked one of the toughest exams with an All India Rank 1. Now it is creating a kind of social influence, it is creating a persuasive effect, stating that you can be mainstreamed provided you utilize all the opportunities. So that is what is meant by social modeling. That is what is meant by social modeling. Right? Now this is all about disabled section or disabled people. Now disabled people and your old, more or less a similar kind of issues. Now when you talk about your old or your senile individuals or senescence or the age of senescence, basically you need to look into the demographic composition. It is around 8.6%. Your senior citizens, it is about 8.6%, and it is anticipated that it is going to reach 16% by 2040 and 20% by 2050. That means because of the statistics which indicate that the population of old age people is going to reach around 20% by 2050, it basically indicates that it is going to be an aging population. By 2050 it is going to be an aging population. Now when by 2050 it is going to be an aging population, that means you basically need to ensure certain levels of social security mechanisms or social safety nets. Yes or no? So when you look at the issues with respect to disabled section, it is more or less similar to, when you look at the issues with respect to your senior citizens, it is more or less with respect to the issues of disabled only. You will have your social issues. Yes, the social issues is mostly centered around isolation, the disconnect, the incapabilities. Now once you become old or senior citizens have physical incapabilities similar to that of disabled. Now because of physical incapabilities, they would lose the social respect that they enjoyed during this working age. Now because of this loss of social respect, whatever they have seen, and because of the loss of social status, whatever they have experienced, it is going to create a kind of emotional turmoil or emotional distress or a want of emotional support. Yes? Now when you look at economic aspects also, they would not have any kind of economic autonomy or financial independence. They are dependent. That is why they are part of your dependency ratio. Yes? So with respect to the social status, with respect to the economic status, with respect to the emotional status, all three statuses are dependent. They are dependent on some other people because they do not have the capabilities, the capacities, or their physiological condition is not supporting to ensure financial, social and emotional independence. Yes, so these are broader aspects with respect to your disabled section. So when it comes to your senior citizen section, you basically need to remember that 8.6% is the present demographic composition, and it is going to reach 16%, then 20% by 2050. Whatever issues of disabled are issues of your senior citizens. Then measures. What are the measures? Constitutional measures. Article 41. Yes?
So the issues like what I noted was emotional support, lack of emotional support, lack of proper healthcare and need for better infrastructure, dependent on young population, more dependence, increased dependence, and issues with the mobilization. Any other? Economic,
social and emotional. Because there are instances where they face social disrespect. Yes. So this is all about. Now what are the measures for your senior citizens? What are the measures for your senior citizens?
Like legal.
Let it be structured. Constitutional, you talked about Article 41. Then?
Like
21, 41, 51A also, fundamental duties. To ensure standard of living. Right? Now legal measures. Now you have a Senior Citizens Act 2007. You have a Senior Citizens Act 2007, basically that is talking about the maintenance of Senior Citizens Act 2007, where it penalizes or where it provides a kind of financial obligation on the sons and daughters of that particular old person, where they are supposed to provide a kind of compensation or a kind of maintenance amount which is legally enforceable. Now if your son is not paying you 10,000 rupees per month or something, you can get him behind bars.
Same kind of thing came up in Uttar Pradesh recently.
Yes. I mean, this is a national law which is persisting.
Parents need reasons twice.
Huh.
They will not be given any
Compensation.
Reduction.
reduction of compensation and incentives.
Yes. Now you have your social safety mechanism like Indira Gandhi Old Age Pension Scheme, IGNOPS, Indira Gandhi National Old Age Pension Scheme, IGNOAPS, IGNOPS, which is part of your National Social Assistance Program, NSAP. Then I have your medical support. Right? Ayushman Bharat, medical insurance, Ayushman Bharat. Ayushman Bharat. Yes. Okay. Any institutional, maybe you can say Ministry of Social Empowerment only, but as such there is no kind of, you don't have any commission for old people or like that. Basically, now don't you think if they start coming up with certain institutional setup for your senior citizens, don't you think it is against the ethos of Indian philosophy? Yes?
Questioning the Indian.
Indian ethos. Because when you look at the Indian philosophy or Indian ethos, we respect elders. We are supposed to respect elders. And we have an inherent moral duty or moral obligation with respect to looking after your parents. Now, why do you think the concept of Pitra Rina was involved? Why? Rina, concept of Rina, the debt.
Pay the respect to the parents.
Daiva Runa, Pitra Runa, Manushya Runa.
On the contrary, given the extent of nuclearization happening within the society.
That's what.
It's like whatever happening, everybody knows, but nobody is
Vocal about it. Vocal about it.
Should we have some sort of institution?
Certainly we need to have. Certainly we need to have. That's why they are creating a kind of legal obligation on compensation money. That is why I think at least with respect to upholding the ethos. I think they are not vocal about, or they are not coming up with respect to certain policies directly by setting up an institution for looking at the, or commission for senior citizens. Because as per Indian philosophy, or the contributions of Indian philosophy to the world philosophy, one major contribution we have is respecting elders. The philosophy of respecting elders. Now when you look at your this Varnashrama dharmas, where you have, when you are part of this Gruhastu, when you are part of your Gruhastu, the one of the important aspects is you look into the contributions for the welfare of your parents during their Vanaprastha stage. So when you have such a philosophical and strong scriptural support with respect to respecting of elders and with respect to taking care of elders, don't you think creation of a kind of commission for senior citizens is an inherent contradiction? I think at least what I perceive is, at least for this reason only, they are not going for creation of any kinds of commission on senior citizens. I don't know, maybe there might be some other issues, but as per my personal perception, or what I perceive from the understanding is, it is basically to be vocal about the Indian contributions to the world philosophy.
Indian ethos was supposed to be loyal to their wives, but still
We had
rampant HIV/AIDS.
we had not only rampant, when you look at your Victorian morality regarding your adultery or your extramarital affairs. Your extramarital affairs. Because when you look at marriage as an institution, it was supposed to be an institution of chaste and chastity and loyalty. But it's against the ethos. But the fundamental contradiction for that kind of chastity in marriage as an institution is, our social system is ridden with an evil of patriarchy. That is the reason why they have gone for certain gender biased laws. When you look at your domestic violence law, don't you think it is a gender biased law? Is your husband protected from this domestic violence? Huh? In spite of finding so many dents on the utensils in kitchen? Huh? Whatever comes to hand, beat the husband, break his head. And in turn, she only goes and puts 498A. Now the silent witness for whole of this activity is the dent on that utensil. What else? On a lighter note. Huh? Yes? Now maybe they'll technologically upgrade. Huh? Maybe with Dumble or one-time solution. Current shock. Innovative. Huh? Using government property, yes. Hard to find a clue also. You can say you put his finger inside. Anyway, he'll get stuck there. You say he put by himself. Huh? Just on a lighter note, right? No, otherwise women around will butcher me then. Huh? Right?
You have seen such things.
You have seen such things? Oh.
My father is a lawyer, so
Oh, okay. You'll have that exposure. 498A. I think there are a lot of debates that are going on around 498A also. It is one such law which has been most misused. Yes, true.
So how do you know if the law has been misused or not? It could be
Conviction rates.
I mean, the conviction rates could be skewed because of other reasons also, right? Because of
No.
disempowerment of the other party.
No. There are instances of innocent victims.
That I agree with completely.
Mhm.
But then there can also be case of disempowerment of the other the person accusing, and then the accused of a higher stature of life.
Basically, when you look at Section 498 or Domestic Violence Act 2005, it has a lot of inclination towards women. So the burden of proof basically falls on male member. It falls on male member. So the benefit of doubt, whatever kind of benefit of doubt that is created there, is in women's pocket. So that is why there are a lot of debates going on around with respect to Domestic Violence Act. That's why they talk about like Mahila Sangalu, Purusha Sangalu. Bharya Badituల Sangalu. There are things which are present. But no doubt there is rampant domestic violence. Yes, it is a weapon in the hands of women. But just like your Me Too campaign, which had certain criticisms with respect to Me Too campaign, was being used as a tool of settling scores, tool of vengeance. Tool of vengeance. How many of you have seen Section 375 movie? Section 375? No? Watch it. Watch it.
Article 15.
Article not 15. Section 375. Watch that movie. Beautiful screenplay.
It's about what?
As of now, watching no movies.
No movies? No, you can watch such movies. I will say you can watch.
What is it about? Section 375.
It is all about rape allegations, false rape allegations, where the consensual sex turns into a rape because of certain favors not being given to one of the parties. I mean the female member of that particular contract or of that particular consensual agreement. Just watch it. You have seen this? And a similar kind of gender biased laws are basically misused because the benefit of doubt, the kind of social sympathy and empathy that is provided with respect to such cases, mostly they are inclined towards women. And there are certain instances where the burden of proof on the male member cannot be even proved because you don't know, or the proofs that can be put forth by the male member are so abstract. They are so abstract. Now love as a concept or live-in relationship as a concept is so abstract. Now live-in relationship might appear as a forced agreement rather than a consensual agreement if it turns negative. Yes. I think your senior hockey player, I think Sardar Singh only, the former Indian captain of hockey, he was alleged of this rape. But the thing was, they had a consensual agreement and it has been a 9-year-old consensual agreement. And after 9 years, that lady comes up and says that or alleges the person of rape. I'm not sure about the name, whether it was Sardar Singh. I think it was Sardar Singh. But just check. Former Indian hockey captain. And court did not agree. Court denied it. My dear, you are staying with him for 9 years. And how suddenly one fine morning you realized he was raping you? It is not that you are a mentally retarded person. You are mentally sound. You are physically sound. And you had all the consensus. And suddenly after 9 years, if the tables are turning against you, you come and say that he is raping us or he is raping me. Or there are allegations of rape against the male member. You.
On the contrary, one's consent given is not for an eternal time, right?
Yes.
Maybe,
But not.
Maybe the next time when there is a no time, it's a no, right?
No is a no. Certainly. But when you're in your consensual period, you cannot allege That person has been raping that particular candidate from the day one. That's pure manipulation, or that is pure way of finding a loophole and circumventing the law. And there are a number of such laws in India, especially those laws which are based on your Victorian morality. Okay. Now I think the last vulnerable section. What is your last vulnerable section? Transgenders. Now my dear, if anyone is planning to open an civil society organization or non-governmental organization in future, please consider this community. Please consider this community. I have certain serious considerations, but I think it has been 3 years that I have been trying on this particular section, but there are a lot of implementational issues. Practically I have seen. Practically I have seen. It is very difficult. Society will not let you. Now, it was not as easy as setting up an NGO, running an organization for looking into the education sector of rural India. That was very easy to say, because in spite of lack of funds we were having, we were able to pull up our stipends and we were able to start off. And later on, there were a lot of helping hands coming up, and that became a very successful journey, and it is going on now. But trust me, I think from 2018 onwards, I have been trying on this section. It's transgenders. Very difficult to move in. Very difficult to move in.
In a sense, I don't understand. Mobilization of funds or just gathering the people in?
No.
People are not ready to answer.
First thing is acceptance. Acceptance from their side and acceptance from societal side. Because there is such an extent of social stigma, you believe it or not, whatever organization I was trying to put forth and manifest from the government side with respect to welfare of transgenders, they were calling it as, I should not use that word, it was seen or it was being considered as a center of prostitution. But what was the intent? To work for the welfare of transgenders. You will be ridiculed in the society, I am telling you. It is not easy. Not at all easy. Then when you start facing such allegations, what you do? You simply drop down and sit. Go to hell, let God save them. When you look at the sad plight of transgenders, believe me, my dear, it's horrible state of life. Horrible state of life. They have neither their parents on their side, they have neither the society on their side, they have neither the government on their side, neither even your civil society organizations. Now, one way of doing or uptaking welfare mechanism with respect to transgender is making transgender himself or herself as the face of that organization. That is the only solution I found. You as a normal being of society, you cannot afford to get their acceptance. It's very difficult. Because they'll have so much of societal apprehensions, they'll have so much of societal resistance with respect to whatever kind of welfare you are going to uptake. Now basically the sector which I tried was upskilling this section and enabling them for self-employment. Now the funds from private organization was ready. We had an organizational network, it was ready. And governmental permissions anyway we could have got somehow. But the issue lied was, they were not ready to come. Because the kind or the levels of social stigma that they had faced for whatever lifetime they had lived is to such an extent that they are even scared to take a single step towards you. Because every part of their life was filled with exploitation. Every part of their life was filled with stigma. Every part of their life was filled with stereotyping. Every part of their life was filled with prejudices. From their birth, they are alienated. They are orphaned. Now, after seeing that particular section so closely and their socio-economic status so closely, you would realize that the real orphans are not those people who don't have parents, but these people are real orphans of the Indian society. Now, why do you think such kinds of radical behavior is seen in these people? Why are they so demanding? Why?
They pushed them to such an extent that they started.
Even kids also bully them.
Bully them. Now, the kind of social opposition they faced and the degree of radicalism that is seen in their behavior, it is all turning all their tears into stones. It is all into stones. Now, do you think whatever kind of behavior they show in front of you, is it the same at their houses? Or is it the same at their habitat where they stay? No. No, not at all. Because behind them there is huge network of organized crime. That is another issue. You cannot bear the pressure of that political, criminal and police nexus. There are a lot of politicians, there are a lot of police people, there are a lot of criminals involved behind the creation of this organized network or organized crime, and the face of it is your transgenders. Basically, this organized crime is leveraging upon the sad state of affairs with respect to the transgenders. And if you want to undertake any welfare mechanism for these transgenders, the most important hurdle for you to cross is that nexus. They'll say, what for you? What are you getting? Arey Babu, we don't need anything, we are not getting anything, we are just trying to help them. They are not ready. If you are going to help them, they are going to get empowered. Now, when they are going to get empowered, who is going to work for us? That is their attitude. That is their attitude. Now, how many transgender activists are there? Very few. Very few. Very few transgender activists. Now, when you look at the transgender activists, it is only the certain empowered section or certain section of transgenders who are nurtured by the society, by giving them education, by giving them health, by giving them basic social needs. They basically get into transgender activism. Now let's come back to subject. When you look at the demographic composition of transgenders as per year 2011 census, it is 4.88 lakh people. .88 lakh people.
Even after education, after getting a graduation certificate also, they are not getting jobs also.
I'll tell you one classic example.
Students are there who are transgenders.
Yes, I'll tell you one classic example of policy failure with respect to transgenders. How many have heard about Cochin Metro? Cochin Metro.
Recently they employed transgenders.
Not recently, 2018.
I was Delhi.
No, Cochin. Cochin Metro.
Right station.
Cochin Metro, they employed transgenders. It was completely an all transgender managed metro. Now, when you look at the today's status of that Cochin Metro, the attrition rate of transgenders is more than 60%. That means out of 10 transgenders, 6 transgenders have already left. This is one classic policy failure. Now, how many states have a categorical or a special transgender policies? Tamil Nadu and Karnataka, that's it. And Karnataka's model or Karnataka's policy on transgenders is considered as a role model policy. It is little more comprehensive. Okay. There was a lot of work which I did on this particular community. Lot of background work. But the sad state is could not manifest. To such an extent that even the psychological aspects of these transgenders were studied. Psychological aspects.
So how did you conduct the study?
Who?
You conducted the study.
I conducted the study. I did not go into psychological aspect. I had one friend from psychology. So, I mean, not optional psychology, but he was a psychologist. He was a practicing psychologist. And he came into the thing here. Especially areas like Delhi and Mumbai, you can study this particular section very closely. Now it takes for you to get acquainted with them and make them believe that, my dear, we are for studies and we are for welfare. It will take you nearly at least 20 days. 20 days. That kind of confidence building, that kind of trust building you make with these people, it will take you at least 20 days. 20 days is, I think, the earliest I have told you. Now, before starting work on these people, we thought it will be something very similar to like that Hoshiarpur incident, what we did with respect to the schools, the setting up of labs in schools. We thought it will be so simple, go set up lab, chalo, start expanding it. Then in the span of...
Did they interact with you actually?
Who?
The transgender?
Yeah, only after 20-25 days. They'll attack you physically.
Like I had an encounter actually, like in the Mumbai railway, like local railway. So I was traveling by the train, and then a fleet of 20 people came around me. And, like I and my friends were there actually. So first they were asking for the money. So they were original transgenders to for them. So we gave them the money. So later that when we are talking in our regional language, Pasa Telugu, so they identified us as Telugu people. So they got connected. We are also from the same. And
Achha.
they were so happy.
Okay.
And they were hugging us and we even took a selfie.
Nice.
Like they were so soft people.
Okay. Now coming to the issues of transgenders. Issues of transgenders. The first issue is physical. They would have certain physiological shortcomings or certain kinds of genetic aberrations. Certain kinds of genetic aberrations. Aberrations.
Means?
Aberrations means certain deviations at your chromosomal level. Certain kinds of genetic aberrations or certain kinds of aberrations with respect to the sexual inclinations. Sexual inclinations, for example, here homosexuals, they are LGBTQ community. See, transgenders is just one section of this. Okay. So when you talk about your physical or physical issue, is their gender is not determined. They have this gender ambiguity or they are ambiguous about their gender. First thing. Then you have these social issues. The first thing is social stigma, social alienation, social discrimination, or social indifferences. Again, lack of access to health, education, any kind of psychological support. Then lack of economic opportunities. Economic opportunities. Now here for social also you can write social ill treatment. Social ill treatment. Social ill treatment. Now economic, lack of economic opportunities or income security or higher prevalence or incidence of poverty. Higher prevalence or incidence of poverty. Now your economy, you can even write about the exploitation with respect to begging, then with respect to prostitution, begging and prostitution. As part of social include even identity crisis. Identity crisis. Tell me how many of the transgenders can boldly come up and say we are transgenders? No.
It comes under social stigma.
Social stigma only. They have an identity crisis. These are certain issues persisting around transgenders. Then what about measures? Measures?
Policy making.
Constitution.
Measures? 41 is there. 15, 16. 15, 16. Then legal measures. Transgender Act 2019. Transgender Act 2019. Transgender Act 2019. As per institutional, National Transgender Commission. As per institutional setup, National Transgender Commission, NTC. Now please go and read the provisions of Transgender Act 2019. Now if you want me to give the evaluation, I'll give you in tomorrow's class. I would suggest you to read once.
You do not approve of this bill, this act.
Of this act?
Actually,
To an extent.
To an extent, you do not approve, or you approve.
I do not.
And that was the general critique of this act, at least in the newspaper.
Yes.
last year
I do
there
not.
was more speculation regarding this. Like regarding he must go to the district magistrate to get the
Yes.
certificate.
Yes. Yes. Now that's why this year's economic survey, when you read this year's economic survey, it emphasizes on something called as over-regulation. I think the fourth chapter or the third chapter, I think the fourth chapter and fourth and fifth basically deal with over-regulation and regulatory forbearance. Yes, regulatory forbearance and over-regulation. Now the economic survey or chief economic advisor states that the over-regulation in Indian policy making is basically to avoid discretion. To avoid discretion and to avoid the misuse of power. But you are supposed to ensure this over-regulation only till certain point where it does not impact the growth trajectory of India. Now, when you find that this over-regulation is going to impact the growth trajectory of India, then you need to flip your policy making into regulatory forbearance. Regulatory forbearance basically indicates a kind of relaxation or a kind of window of tolerance for whatever kinds of regulations that are going to be imposed. Now, in this case also in transgenders, it's a kind of over-regulation. It's a kind of over-regulation with respect to Transgenders Bill or Transgenders Act, with an assumption that if they provide a level of discretion with respect to this transgender, then it is going to be high levels of misuse. Because when you talk about self-claiming, now one thing what the government misses here is, now it says that if you provide the self-claiming of the gender that you are a transgender, then there is going to be misuse. That's why you're going to go and report to the district magistrate and get a certificate from district magistrate stating that you are a transgender. And if the district magistrate rejects the application, then you don't have any appeal mechanism. That is one of the most inherent criticism with respect to this particular act. It provides for a process of registration, but it does not provide for a process of appeal if this registration process fails. That means this is basically depending to a larger extent on documentary evidences of gender. Now, one small logic I somewhere feel government misses is, now suppose if you are allowing for self-claiming or self-appraisal mechanism and stating you are a transgender and whatever kind of employment opportunities or whatever kind of educational reservation that is to be given for you will be given. Now tell me how many people who are not transgenders are ready to claim that they are transgenders? Do you think they'll claim? No, obviously not.
So many people, mainly men, they dress up like a transgenders and they come and beg on road.
That is one, they are doing beggary. Now when you bring to the formal employment and when you bring to a formal organization, when you bring to a formal organization,
this will not.
and in spite of him or her not being a transgender, if he self-acclaims and if he self-appraises himself to a transgender, do you think the society is going to live? Because the actual transgenders are not spared by the society. I don't understand why government missed this logic. Personal opinion. Post a lot of detailed analysis on this community. Personal opinion again. It is very obvious, no?
Yes.
It is very obvious. Why will a person who is not a transgender, if you are providing a clause of self-appraisal, go and say, I am a transgender, give me reservation of 3%. No, reservation bhaad mein jaye, forget that reservation. Now, just imagine the extent of social stigma that person will be subjected to, extent of social discrimination, social ill treatment. Now, if he is just looking for that 3% reservation what transgenders are going to get, and which was given as part of your Suresh Kaushal case by your Delhi High Court or Supreme Court, it is not going to be justified. It is not going to be justified. Now, I somewhere feel they should have given this self-appraisal mechanism with respect to claiming of transgender at least. This is one inherent drawback of this law. The second inherent drawback of this law is, I think that was changed later on with respect to beggary clause. Now, when you find the only possible kinds of employment what this particular community can do and is indulged in is beggary. Now, when you are going to criminalize this beggary activity, now on what basis they are going to lead their life? On what basis they are going to lead their life? You're not going to give them employment. You're going to criminalize their prostitution activity. You're going to criminalize their beggary activity. You're not providing any kind of identity to them in any form except your Aadhaar. Now in any of the application or in any of the employment opportunities also, you're not giving the provisions of third gender to an extent. Now tell me, how are they going to live? Now I think later on with the number of activists with respect to, the prominent activists with respect to transgenders, they have got it corrected little bit and they have decriminalized beggary activity. They have decriminalized beggary activity. So policy making with respect to transgenders is also not empathetic in nature. Not empathetic in nature. You should have brought in four prominent transgenders and asked them to sit with them when they are framing the law. Then they'll understand what is the real concern. Now what will a bureaucrat who is sitting in an AC chamber understand about transgender? Apart from knowing that in traffic signal they are begging for money. And apart from that bureaucrat knowing that, no, I don't have money, please get lost. What else will he know? He'll not know anything. Will he know something from papers? Now you take UPSC aspirants only. What we write on paper, is it true in your practical formats? The most unethical fellow who was Karim IPS got caught in your civil services exam. He was the highest scorer in ethics exam. The irony is that. Why? I'm not criticizing the process. Please pardon me on records. That is what it is. The Karim who got caught in 2018 means cheating with respect to your using of dark web technology. He was the highest scorer in ethics just the year before. Now what you're writing on papers, does it validate the true nature of the individual? Absolutely not. So whatever your reports are writing about a particular section of the society, do you think it is going to validate on it? No, ridiculously not. It is not going to. Unless and until you bring them to the policy making bench and ask them, Arey Babu, what are your issues? It's not going to happen. Now I'm not talking about only transgenders. You talk about any of these marginal sections apart from children. Leave children. Your women, that is why I talked about women representation. Your scheduled castes, your scheduled tribes, your minorities, or your disabled. Any of this, you basically need a policy participative ecosystem. Unless and until you have participative ecosystem for policy making, you cannot make those laws which are comprehensive in nature. Now previously when you talk about the Disabilities Act 1995, there were only 7 disabilities that were classified. Now when you look around in normal society, do you find only 7 disabilities? Then later on, it took them 20 years to realize that there are not only 7 disabilities, there are even more. And in 2016, as per amendment, they expand the list to 21. This is the inherent drawback of Indian governance system. The inherent drawback of Indian governance system is there is no scope for participative governance. When there is no scope for participative governance, which is one of the important principles of good governance, it will further result in governance deficit.